Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first Common Cause event of the spring semester. I'm David Velker, a professor of humanities and history at UW Green Bay, and I'm co-chair of the Common Cause for this year, which included both a conference in the fall and a virtual speaker series throughout the year. In case you need a reminder, CAHSS stands for the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, which is the sponsor of this event. I'm going to begin this evening by reading the Uwgb land acknowledgement, and I think it's especially important that we recognize First Nations for these events, given that we are addressing the relationship between humans and the larger community of life, and First Nations have a very powerful perspective on that relationship. And also given that we're thinking about social justice as an essential part of sustainability. So I just want to pull up another slide here and advance that slide. There we go. We at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay acknowledge the First Nations people who are the original inhabitants of the region. The Ho-Chunk Nation and the Menominee Nation are the original first people of Wisconsin, and both nations have ancient historical and spiritual connections to the land that our institution now resides upon. Today, Wisconsin is home to 12 First Nations communities, including the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin, Forest County Potawatomi, Ojibwe Nation communities, Stockbridge-Munsee Band of the Mohicans, and the Brothers Indian Nation. We acknowledge the First Nations people of Wisconsin. Before we launch into the panel, I want to thank the CAHSS Associate Dean, Ryan Martin, who is the co-chair of Common Cause working with me, Amanda Wildenberg, the assistant to the dean who's running the Zoom event this evening, the Common Cause Planning Committee, and of course, Dean Chuck Ryback for his support of Common Cause. This year, the theme for Common Cause is Beyond Sustainability, Imagining an Ecological Future. This theme is an invitation to think about how we might benefit from a more robust framework than environmental sustainability to address the interrelated environmental and social crises that we now face. The year 2020 was tumultuous in many ways, and tonight, introducing this event, of course, I think of the killing of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, but of course we have the pandemic. If we extend 2020 slightly, we also have the events at the Capitol building on January 6th. So there's many reasons why you might look at this past year and think, wow, this was a tumultuous year. Heading into 2021, many people may eagerly hope for a return to what we often call normal. But if we really look at it, the pre-2020 status quo was highly unsustainable in many ways, including in the area of racial equity and racial justice in the United States and also around the world. We are incredibly fortunate to have Hannah Beauchamp-Pope, Krista Venegas, Miriam Brabham, and Hanette Commanda tonight to speak with us and to talk with each other and to take questions. They are here to help us think about the connections between an enlarged vision of sustainability and racial justice. They will each introduce themselves briefly in just a moment, and you will see how deeply they are engaged with this critical issue. The panelists will each have a chance to speak after they introduce themselves, and then we'll have about 15 minutes at the end of the hour for Q&A. So you have two options for submitting your questions. You can use the Q&A button to formally submit a question. That just goes to the moderators and the panelists. And you can also use the chat if you just want to make a comment or ask a more informal question, and we will be taking a look at the chat when we get to the Q&A segment. So either way you want to go is okay. So I'd like to thank our panelists for sharing their experiences and perspectives and ideas and visions with us this evening, and for being here. It's of course a really, really busy time for everybody, and we are incredibly fortunate to have each of these panelists as leaders on the UWGB campus and in the larger community. So I'm going to turn things over to the panelists now for so they can introduce themselves. And I think Hannah will start with you, and then go through our order of speakers, and then just circle back. And Hannah, you can get us started then. Thanks a lot.
Okay, hi everybody. Thank you all for coming today. We really do appreciate your participation in this to help us carry on, this movement. My name is Hannah Beauchamp-Pope. I am a sophomore at UW Green Bay, previously from Green Bay though. It's where my hometown is. I am studying democracy and justice studies and human biology, and kind of why I'm here today is I'm the vice president of our Black Student Union here at UW Green Bay, and I'm also a pretty prominent leader in our community in terms of protests and stuff like that. I also volunteer at We All Rise African American Community Resource Center, and I have been nominated to be UWGB's 2021-2022 Newman Civic Fellow as well. So that's kind of where I'm coming from today.
Hi, everyone. Again, like Hannah stated, thank you all for coming today, just giving us this hour of your time. My name is Krista Venegas. I am from Racine, Wisconsin. I'm a junior here at GB. My major is Democracy and Justice Studies with an emphasis in legal studies, and my minor is Spanish. I am Good Times Programming's Culture and Communities programmer, so my role here is just to do what I do, further educate or try to educate fellow activists in just the pursuit for civil and social justice.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Miriam Brabham, and I am a multicultural advisor for the Multi-Ethnic Student Affairs Office here on Green Bay's campus. I have the privilege of serving all of these wonderful young ladies as their advisor, and I have been on GB's campus for about 1.5 years. I've only been in GB for 2 years, so been in my current role now for 6 months. So I'm really excited to get to know the community better and to get more involved in the community and social justice issues. But right now, my role is to serve and support these students as they go off and develop and become leaders in this great community.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Hanette Commanda. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I am a current senior here at UW Green Bay, and I study psychology with an emphasis mental health and gender and cultural diversity. And then I minor in women and gender studies and human development. As part of this community on campus, I am a resident assistant. I'm also a Pride Center intern, and I am a part of the Leaders Igniting Transformation student org here on campus, a part of their executive board. And I'm also a student leader in creating the BIPOC Rise mentorship program here on campus, which is an emerging department that is being created right now. And I'll tell you more about that later on, but that's just a little bit about me.
Okay, so I guess just in terms of how I feel about racial sustainability and what we need to do, a lot of people just assume, like Mr. Volker was saying earlier, that everything's going to go kind of back to this normal. And I think for a lot of us that would be scary. Today is actually the 1-year anniversary of Ahmaud Arbery being lynched, unfortunately. So a lot to think about today as we kind of see how in a year, we have had all of these uprisings in different communities and different cities. We've had some laws passed, but overall, we still have what I believe to be our biggest boundary is healing the American psyche and how we view each other. And I think in terms of racial sustainability, that's our biggest obstacle, because I feel in order for us to be in a society safely, healthily, where we're all treated with some sort of, given our human rights, I guess you could say, that we should have anyway, we have this, and I think the media plays into this a lot too. It's like a wall that's put up between people who look like us and people who don't look like us, or maybe if it's your political affiliation or whatever it may be. And for some reason, we just cannot seem to connect with this other side. And the effects that we see in this is police brutality. It is just, today I saw, we have another story of 3 Black men who were shot, unfortunately, by a white supremacist in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And it's just, yeah, and it's like, again, you know, how many times does this have to happen before we really start to come together? And I think a big part of that is just that lack of understanding, you know, that we are all human, that we all have a lot of the same struggles, a lot of the same obstacles in our life. And even though we may be painted differently, we still experience life similarly. So I think that when it comes to how do we move forward, a lot of it comes down to just like what we're doing today, sitting down and having this talk together where we can share experiences, we can really address these things, because I mean, police brutality has been happening since we've had slave patrol. So if you can imagine the amount of times that, you know, just protesting and then have it being shut down once it's not in the light of the media anymore. And I think that we have to be diligent. We have to continue to be committed to talking about this, because talking about it, understanding each other, and then, you know, going forward and making laws and then healing that American psyche where we won't feel so divided, we won't feel so unsafe or somehow empowered to take away another person's life. I think that a lot of that goes into what we need to do to be an actual united nation.
Well, that was really good, Hannah, first of all. So just basically completely agreeing with Hannah and going based off of that, how I feel like we need to take the necessary steps towards sustainability, and just understanding that sustainability is way more than the atmosphere and the ecosystem and how we treat Mother Earth. It's literally how we treat each other. And I think like the most important aspect of this all, like the idea of sustainability, is acknowledging, like taking the time to learn each other and how we interact and how those interactions affect not only society negatively, but human nature, like Earth, and just how we think and perceive people negatively. For example, being from Racine and preceding the Jacob Blake shootings last summer, like it was really hard to be in GB knowing my mom and my little brother were home so close to such violence, such blatant racism, and just knowing that it negatively affected not only how we socially interact, but it negatively affected the earth, like the smoke, the smog, the pollution from all the buildings in Kenosha that were set on fire, and the looting, the people's livelihoods that were ruined as a result of Jacob Blake being shot in the back 7 times. I think it's just really important and essential that we realize that sustainability and human nature and like humanity, it starts in the home. It's taught to you. You're taught to treat others the way you want to be treated. You're taught that everyone is deserving of respect and love and kindness. So I feel like just emphasizing that and implementing it in our daily lives is essential. We can't change and we can't help Earth in any type of way if we can't help each other. And I think we need to all get out of like this really selfish mindset that what our actions don't affect other people, because it's evident that what we do, how we treat people, how we view people, it either negatively or positively affects us in one way or another. And we really just need to realize that, like, redefine sustainability, how we talk about sustainability, and then redefining how we talk about these important issues like social justice and civil issues, racism, discrimination, voter determinant. Like, just this last election, we did see a lot of instances of there were people trying to hinder people from going to exercise their right to vote. And we just need to really come together. Like, we're human nature, we all have to coexist on this planet. And that's just not to take care of the planet, that's to take care of humans. So I think it's really important to just really reemphasize how we interact with people and how we reprimand those who kind of go against the goal. And the ultimate goal really needs to be addressing the issues that were founded in this country: racism, discrimination, and not extending rights to everybody in this country.
I'm impressed by these two young ladies, and I'm sure that Annette is going to blow me away too. So I just want to say that I'm really fortunate to know these young ladies, because as we go through this journey of EDI, the diversity and inclusion, and all of that as a field, right? Like, that's what I work in, that's my field. It can be tiring. It can be tiring to continuously do this, because this is what I live outside of what I do. I have racial experiences that I live day to day. And so to talk about it and to do it in my work as well can be very tiring. And young people like this panel give me that fuel to get up and do it again the next day, because that is what we talk about sustainability. When we look at the earth and we're like, oh man, how much have we damaged? Can we even come back from this? But then you see that concrete rose, that rose that comes through anyway, that unextinguishable fire to live and to thrive. Those are the qualities that I see in this panel. That is what I see in our future activists. And that right there is what gives me the strength to address this conversation over and over. Because when we talk about sustainability and racial justice, this is not a new concept. You know, Jacob Blake being shot, George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, how many names can we list? How many? I can't fit them on a shirt front and back. I can't. Long sleeve with a hoodie, I can't. So we have to continuously have this conversation. And this conversation can be exhausting for people of color. And seeing the passion that I see in these students is what gives me the strength to say it is worth it every time we have this conversation. Because when I think about sustainability and racial justice, like, we have climate deniers who don't believe that the climate is changing, who don't believe that the earth is being affected. We have people that don't believe that race is still an issue, right? If we stopped talking about it, it would go away, and it won't. And these conversations become ever more essential to continue having, because it won't just go away. And when we have these conversations, it can be hard, it can be raw, right? Like, we have to know that there is going to be guilt and shame, and there is going to be pride and anger. And we have to set all of that aside to be completely honest about what our actual goal is. How do we get to a place of peace? How do we get to a justice of reform? How do we get to a place of having these conversations in the absence of name calling, in the absence of attacking? How do we get there? And if we have that goal in mind and that commonality, no matter what your skin color, orientation, all of it is, if we have that common goal, there is nothing in human nature that can stop us from achieving it. Because if we came from discovering fire from rocks all the way to sending Perseverance to Mars, we can do anything. And so it is ever important that we instill in these students that faith and that belief that tomorrow is possible and that nothing is irredeemable. And so when we look at racial justice, it can get ugly, right? Like we can look back and be hurt. And when we talk about the riots and the protests and whatever word you want to attribute to it, when we look at that, we can ask why and how did it happen and why it shouldn't have happened or what could have happened differently. But we have to remember that protests are the language of the unheard, right? And so we're not being heard. And we have to find a way to support our young people to be heard and to be this change that we want to see in the world. And so I think that having these conversations and setting aside our own desires to be whatever, right or wrong, to shame or to blame, all of those things, when we set that aside and we have that clear pathway forward, we are leaving behind a world that is more sustainable in terms of our actual environment. But because of the people, if we ourselves are fed as humans, right, then we in turn would feed our world and we would replenish our world and we would repair our world. In that goodness that we feel in ourselves is reflected in our environment because we are all connected. Nothing that we do in this world doesn't affect another person, doesn't affect another living thing. So when we feel good and when we feel heard and seen and having that place, right, then we would do and affect those things for our world. And so I think that that's a big part of it. And I want to just emphasize that when we talk about social justice, getting justice for a group of people does not equal taking anything away from another group of people. So when we discuss this and we have these conversations, we need to be open and raw and vulnerable and set aside our privilege, because I am a person of color, but I am light-skinned and I am coming from a place of privilege. And I have to set my privilege aside to hear where my dark-skinned brothers and sisters are coming from and how I can support them better. So I understand from both sides of having privilege and from being in a non-privileged position. So it is my honor to serve these young women and to serve all the students of this great institution for a better tomorrow.
Well, you know, I'm just gonna log off since I can't follow that up now. You know, huge echo to what has been said by everyone, because it speaks volumes and truth to what we're doing here and what we are trying to achieve with the topic of sustainability, and understanding that it's deeper than race and saving the earth and the ecosystem. All of it goes in hand. All of those things are intersecting with one another. And since there is just great points that touch upon us as a society as a whole, I would like to just, you know, take a more narrow focus on the campus community at Uwgb and what we are doing here for sustaining our students, sustaining our earth, but also sustaining the relations between students. I started here as a freshman in fall 2017, and this is my last semester. But when I came here, I was a part of a small ethnic group of students that were admitted here. The class before me was much smaller, but I was supposed to be a part of, I was considered some of the more bigger class of students of diversity, and classes that came after me continued to expand upon that. And as I heard the statistics of students of color entering here increasing, my mind kind of just went to, all right, this is amazing, you know, that we're becoming a more diverse campus, but what are we doing to sustain those students of color here and retain those students of color here as well? What efforts are we doing to make this environment both fair and equal for all students, and continue to keep them here and understand that this is an institution that wants them to succeed? And that was something that has been a huge challenge that I've noticed here at Uwgb. but it's definitely an issue that we have to acknowledge is a department-wide situation and not just a single housing or those who are interacting with students in terms of student lives and branches off of those. It's every educational department. What are you doing, professors, to assure that your students of color are being heard and seen and assure that there aren't microaggressions or forms of racism, sexism, homophobia, that there's equal opportunities for success within the classroom? Major-wise, what are we doing that students are having a understanding of racial justice and sustainability overall and are able to understand that their department wants them to be successful by the time they're completed with their major and working with the different fields and working with different groups of people as far as understanding how to collaborate with people from different backgrounds, but also understand the privileges they may hold and the differences they may see within their peers, but understanding how to be an ally towards one another. What are we doing as an institution to teach our students about privileges and about how our society affects college campuses and how to understand the power of universities in affecting the community and being able to lead research and how to make better practices within our society? These are questions that different departments are definitely looking into, but we have to start working unified towards making this a reality for our campus. I noticed within my freshman year and throughout my time here that representation was something that I struggled with finding, or it wasn't a huge amount of representation, especially for my peers who are men of color, not being able to really see that reflection within our staff or not being able to see that reflection amongst their peers or just within the school overall. Green Bay is UW Green Bay is a very isolated campus from the city, you know. It's a beautiful campus as far as what we have surrounding us, but the campus environment here, and once you leave the forest and like I like to say, and enter into the city, it's almost as if you're entering two different cities almost, or just entering two different environments. Being able to understand and feel that your campus can provide care towards your needs as well as acknowledgement and not ignoring your identities, but understanding that your identities are something that oppresses you in society, but you won't oppress you here on campus. The things that are considered to be uplifting towards you, and that professors and faculty and staff care about making sure that your voice is seen and heard. I definitely felt that when I did get a chance to find my representation and my mentors here at Uwgb, I thought back to how I can, assure that younger classes that come in to UWGB have that same certainty, and they don't have to search long and hard or struggle with finding those resources that they have on campus for students of color and just for equal opportunities for students with any marginalized identity. And that's kind of how I came about with creating my mentorship program, BIPOC Rise, which stands for Reaching Intersectional Strengths Through Engagement and focuses on Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, and multicultural students. And our overall goal is, to provide academic, emotional, psychosocial, relational, and professional support to students of color. And we're hoping to achieve this through engagement with academic, peer, community, and professional mentors, and have long-term ongoing relationships with these students. And this is just a small part of the ways that we can create sustainability here on campus and assure that students are receiving equal opportunities for success, but also are in an environment that cares about growth and fostering care towards the students, both on the students and on the faculty end. But yeah.
Okay, wow. Thank you, Hannah and Krista and Miriam and Hannette, for really sharing some insightful comments already. And I'm excited that we have some time for questions, and if some questions have already come in. Before we move on to the questions in the Q&A, I just want to reflect on a couple of things that you all mentioned. So first, it's Black History Month, and I think that, you know, as an educator and a historian, I want to rush to say, like, we have to attend to Black history all the time, all year round, not just for, oh, let's pick one day in February in a course, and at that point, you know, turn our attention briefly to Black history. And I think that historians here at Uwgb do attend to Black history. I know I certainly strive to do that. And I'm just thinking about what Hannah said, you know, the brutality against Black people, against people of African descent, African Americans, goes back to the slave patrols and, you know, those systems put in place to keep Black people in slavery, to control them, to really control their whole lives as part of the system of slavery. And that goes back in this part of North America that became the United States. It goes back to the very early 1600s. So we're not talking about something that's new here. Like, that is really, those are the deep roots of police brutality. So we have that history of oppression. So for those folks who would say, who deny that racism is a thing or systemic racism is a thing, like, can actually trace that back pretty easily several centuries, and it has been done, right? You all know this. I'm also thinking, though, about the way that we can look to history to inspire us. And I'm curious if any of you if there's anything from that past, so not only of oppression, but also resilience, that you find particularly inspiring and that maybe helps you see what that path forward might look like. So I'd like to just start with that, you know, briefly, if you have thoughts on that connection between the past and the present. And then we have some other great questions to tackle. So I'll just turn that question loose and see if anybody would like to respond to it.
I guess I can kind of start. Personally, just being an Afro-Latina, I feel like I come from a bloodline, whether that's my African-American descent, whether that's my Hispanic descent, of resilient, just persistent people. I mean, just the fact that we were brought here, we as in Black people were brought here to do nothing but be slaves, and we've overcome almost every boundary that's been thrown our way, despite racism not really being eliminated, just kind of integrating with the times. I feel like what's most encouraging for me and what's most motivating for me is knowing that there are always people like me who thought like me, who felt as deeply as I did in the pursuit of equality, and not even just wanting to make one lesser than, like we've been made lesser than, just to be equal, just to be seen as humans and to be seen as equally beneficial and contributing to the society. I feel like just knowing how much we're capable of, slaves kind of built this country, not kind of, they did build the country. They were so reliant, colonists were so reliant on the slaves and their labor and indentured servants, no matter the race, to build this country, to get the colonies started. And then I think historically, just knowing that everybody had all odds against them, and look where we are now, I think that's just motivation to go forward, and just for everybody, no matter where you are on the stance, just to know that if people feel this passionately about it and they've been dealing with this systemic racism, with discrimination for their entirety of their life and their ancestors' lives, that we're not going to stop until we get what we want. And that's just how it's going to be.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. That's really well said. I know like one thing that keeps me up and motivated, despite the fact that a lot of this, the news and a lot of our social justice issues, it is very disheartening for people of color, is just remembering, all of those great martyrs that we did put in the ground. So knowing that like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evans, these are all people who died before they even turned 40, and continuously throughout history, you can reflect back to all of these different public figures who put their job, their life, their reputation on the line for the same, dream that we're all fighting for. And I think that just knowing that my ancestors, really physically died for this is enough to get me up and get me going every day, to know that I can't just give up or turn a blind eye to it, because unfortunately, this is the history of my people. And, just like Krista was saying, we have so much power. They brought us here because they needed us to build this country. And even after they freed us, they still put on Tignan laws and, different vagrancy laws that could keep us in chains so that we could in turn be slaves. Because as I'm sure most of you guys know, like the 13th Amendment reads that unless you are convicted of a criminal punishment, then slavery is abolished. Well, if you're a criminal now, you can be a slave. And I think that going back to that understanding really just drives forward into how we're seen today and how the media has portrayed African Americans today. And I think that just understanding that really you've had your entire heritage ripped away from you. You've had to learn all these things, not in schools where they would teach it publicly in our Eurocentric Americanism public school systems, but then you had to dig deeper and really find the ugliness and the truth. And I think it's part of our duty really to be those truth tellers, to continue on the fight to the dream, because unfortunately we've lost too many people to just kind of give up. And even just like today, when I had turned on my phone at the library and I had seen that yet again, we have another act of hate, because that's really all this is hate and misunderstanding. And seeing that we've lost 2 more Black teenage boys, another one still on life support after 3 surgeries. I mean, this is why we have to be so diligent, and this is why every person of color truly just will not give up, even if you may think like, oh, this person's always talking about racism, or why do you have to bring race into everything? Well, if your whole life is affected and people treat you ways because of your race, well then in turn you're going to fight your entire life, commit your whole life to really putting that on the line to make sure that there's change for future generations. So I guess for me personally, I know that the history, reading about my history, reading about not only the civil rights movement, but people who have been breaking chains since the first African person has stepped foot on this land, and all of the violence our community has gone through truly does light a fire inside me to know that, yeah, I will probably be spending my whole life, working towards this. And I'm sure many other people would also agree.
I can go next real quick about just echoing first Krista and Hannah's words. Fully agree. But also when I think back to, our history, especially within this country, for me, I'm a child of immigrants. I have parents who immigrated here from West Africa and came to this country. And my father came here in the 70s. My mother came here in the 80s. And they've experienced the threat to immigrants here within this country, and I've grown up with that being normalized within my family. Despite me being able to fortunately be born in this country, I have cousins who are undocumented. I have family members who are unable to be legalized citizens here, and just the threat to their livelihood. So there's so many intersecting identities that I've been exposed to growing up. That's made me extremely sensitive towards the threat to BIPOC people within this country, but also just at a young age aware of how I have to learn to create a more sustainable future for those who are oppressed and affected now, so that people from younger generations or my kids and their grandkids can grow up in a better environment that I did and my parents did. And, you know, at that same time, growing up with my family and our background of being West African, I got to see immigration disrespect towards them, as well as racial disrespect, because as soon as they came to this country, they weren't seen as immigrants right off the bat. They weren't seen as anyone besides actual Black people, so that are naturalized within this country in that sense. So until they started speaking, so visually they'll face a lot of disrespect and discrimination just based off of their race, because they, my father especially, started off down south in America. So, you know, him coming here in his early 20s, he came here to this country at 22. None of his family members came here with him besides one of his brothers who were already here before him, who came here in the 60s. I have very old parents, if you're wondering. I just became very aware of how important it is to be aware and educated on the differences and changes within your society that you can make, and just aware of the laws and the ways that people like me are oppressed and people who are also from different marginalized communities are oppressed. But what really motivates me and helps me put into perspective how I see the future as far as creating sustainability race-wise, and just healing the earth as well, is that understanding the power of youth voices and understanding the impact that young people have, but really seeing the strength of young people leading, because this is their present and this is the future that they're trying to see and they're going to be around for, working with those who experience a terrible past and want to create a better future, knowing that they might not be able to entirely see the entire growth of the future that they're working towards. They're not in this selfish mindset of, oh, I experienced this, so you also has well. They also have well. They're in a mindset in which they're continuing to grow, and they're understanding that I have to learn and I have to speak with young people and learn and grow and understand how I can be an ally, but also work with them towards creating a more equal and sustainable future. I look up to people like Fred Hampton, who was 21 years old. I'm 22 right now. This man died at 21 years old, but he did so much within his 21 years. And it blows my mind when I think about activists, especially from the Black Panther era within the 70s and 60s, of just how young and brave and fearless they were. Let me not say fearless, because there's plenty of fear, but there wasn't an option to not fight for equality, to not wake up and make change and feed the Black children that were going to school hungry, to pour money into the community, to fight and educate their community, even if they had people that were conspiring against them, or people who would threaten their livelihood every single day, destroying their organizing and comparing them to white supremacists like the KKK. They woke up and they continued to make an environment and to create a community and a world that is better than the one that they're living in. And that was really empowers me and gives me strength when I wake up, and what I decide on what I want to do with my voice, especially because I am humbled, and I think back to the struggles that people like me went through at such a young age, and knowing that this is not something that I have to, grow up or wait to do later on in my life. This is something I can actively do now, because those who did so much of the change that I benefit from today were younger than me or my age while doing that. So that's kind of how I think about reform for the future, the present, and when I look back on the past leaders who believed in social change.
I want to echo what everybody has said, but especially piggybacking off of what Hannette was saying about, you may not be there to see that future, right? Like, That's directly a Martin Luther King quote. Like, I may not get there with you, but I have seen it. So I want to just say that when I look back, I think the reason why the oppression of this country was so successful was because of the stripping of our heritage, our history, ourselves, who we were. So a big part of it is learning that we are descendant of kings and queens, right? Like, how many generations went through and believed that we were only slaves? We've only ever been slaves. So when I think about sustainability and the trajectory that we are on, it feels like it's slow moving, right? It feels like we got stalled in the 60s after the death of our leaders. We feel that way, but I can see that movement. I want to say also too, the 60s don't make your parents super old for all the other people attending this panel. Don't let this moisturizer fool you. But I want to say that I just believe I can see the trajectory of where this is going, because we have so many students who are aware of their history now. And this isn't a struggle that they are going to have to overcome. They have other struggles that they're going to have to overcome, but they are privy to Columbus not discovering America. They are privy to our history as kings and queens and us being more than slaves. And so that is one hurdle that they're not going to have to jump over. And then they will destroy another hurdle that their children won't have to jump over. And that trajectory is upward.
Wow, I just thought that was going to be a, quick, short question about history. Thank you all so much. Those were some amazing comments, and it really, I think, brought together a lot. And Miriam, your point about systematically taking away heritage and history. One thing that jumped to my mind was back in the pre-Civil War period. One of the activists against slavery, William Wells Brown, wrote a book about African Americans in the American Revolution. So he was trying to reclaim that history here in North America as a way to inspire and to claim that place of, proper role as he understood it for African American citizenship. So that's such an important project. I would like to turn to our many questions here, and there are a couple that are really, I think, practical and maybe even pressing. So one of the questions is, how can I get involved with mentoring that you mentioned? And I think this is the BIPOC Rise. As a Black professional, I'd love to help students get involved in things off of campus. So, Hannah, that might be a question for you. I'm not sure, of course, anybody can jump in on that one.
Yeah. Thank you, first of all, for asking that. Just to give a bit more insight about BIPOC Rise, this semester is our trial semester in the sense of really starting to do more introductory events with students. We're having our first event coming up this in March. I should have the date. But I basically our first event is going to be teaching BIPOC students about, we're targeting first year and transfer students who are new to Uwgb first and foremost. But so if you know students who are fit into that demographic, please email myself, and I'll put my email in the chat, or Christine Smith within the psychology department, Dr. Christine Smith. We're aiming to teach BIPOC students more about financial literacy, because BIPOC students financially take out the most student loans and are the most financially disadvantaged when they do attend college, which affects their graduation rate and just overall retention rate. But as far as, sorry, I just want to double check when that's coming out, but if I find it, okay. So basically a little bit more about that. It's coming on March 3rd, 7 p.m. via Zoom. And we are hoping overall with BIPOC Rise, like our goals with that is to really provide peer mentorship as well as, getting them connected within the community. When I say representation, like a Black male wants a lawyer, he wants to be a lawyer, a divorce lawyer, or just any law field, making sure that he has a representation of knowing a Black lawyer while he's an undergrad, so that he has that ability to understand and prepare at a young age while he's in his undergrad career, how to navigate the legal field, what to know before applying to law school, and to know that it's possible, because I personally know a Black male lawyer who's acting as a mentor and a guide towards me. We're hoping to also create a sense of community as far as surviving as a BIPOC student within a predominantly white environment, but still understanding and recognizing our allies and recognizing how they can be successful with the tools that are there for us here at UW Green Bay. Excuse me. As far as how you can personally get involved, definitely, email me directly or Dr. Christine Smith. I'll drop both of our emails in the chat, because we're at the stage now where we are definitely looking for different BIPOC career professionals in the area, so that we could match within the fall, because that's when we're hoping to start pairing up students together. But also we are still doing this semester more topics on holistic health, because we're wanting to support the student holistically. So as far as mental health, finances, in terms of surviving college, just making sure that we are providing discussions and conversations around the support BIPOC students need right now, especially during a pandemic. So if there's things that you're interested in supporting us this semester with that, or if you're just willing to be like, hey, I know a whole bunch of BIPOC professionals within the area, within various fields, we would love that support and would love that connections, because students being able to have connections and being able to have representation and just resources to other BIPOC individuals who can relate to them is extremely crucial towards their educational experience, especially when it comes to finishing college. Being able to see that representation is extremely important in terms of getting towards your goals or your career objectives, especially. So thank you for furthering asking about BIPOC Rise and how you can be of assistance with that. But I will add my email as well as Dr. Christine Smith's email in the chat for you all. I don't know if y'all wanted to also, I didn't want to just take over that question, but if y'all had anything to say about like the importance of mentorship or representation to you here at UWGB, or being a mentor for you, Miriam.
Well, I just wanted to leave a little opening there, but so we still have some questions we haven't answered yet. I don't know, Miriam, did you want to speak to that? Or panelists, I think you all can see the questions in the Q&A, and if there's something that grabs you, you'd really like to respond to, by all means, just go ahead and do that. So I'll just mute myself and see what emerges here.
Y'all got anything you're feeling froggy about?
I would like to answer Chuck Ryback's question. His question is, in his recent book about how to be an anti-racist, Ibram Kendi talks about public policy and how, in his view, progress and sustainability greatly depend on policy changes. What policy changes do you see as being vital right now? And he said at any level. And personally, just being a college student, and since it's so controversial at the moment, especially with Joe Biden and his plan, I think student loan forgiveness is essential. And I feel like it's essential in the terms that we are the future, like all the old people there, they're dying off. So the more we talk about student loan debt, and we horrify it, we fearmonger with student loan debts, and a lot of people, especially just being from Racine, a lot of people of color don't go to four-year institutions because of the fear of student loan debt and the long-term effects of it. I mean, you're going to college for 4 years, you're $11,000 plus in student loan debt. And if you want to go to grad school, that's how many more thousands of dollars. And then you have to be an adult. You have to pay rent, pay your bills, pay your phone bill. If you have kids, pets, you have to provide for them. And just, yeah, that long-term effect of student loans and just how in the education system, especially in the public school system, they kind of make it seem like college is your only choice in life. Like you can't succeed taking other routes than a four-year institution or even a technical college. And I just feel like if student loans could be forgiven or just lessened and the cost of attendance for any institution could be significantly decreased, it would not only benefit our society, it would just help so many people. And it would inspire so many people to pursue education or to pursue their interests in a certain field that maybe they wouldn't pursue because of the fear of student loan debt. And I don't know, I just feel like the more education we could offer, especially higher education, the better place the world would be. Like the more doctors we'll see, scientists, nurses, engineers, and who knows what else we could become. Like,
Just to piggyback, oh, sorry, go ahead, Hannah.
No, go ahead. You had your mic off before. That's okay.
I was gonna say, just to piggyback off of what Krista's saying, to take it from a person who's paying on those student loan debt, okay? The buying power and generational wealth that would be unlocked by forgiving student loan debt and creating a free college system is untapped and unprecedented. I think that right there is one of the great errors of this modern civilized society, we call, because if we were able, we disproportionately as people of color are being held to account for student loan debt at higher rates, at higher loan rates, at higher repayment rates, all of that, than our white counterparts. And that is just fact. And that keeps us from having and building generational wealth for our children to be exposed to different things: piano lessons, swim lessons, ballet, going to study abroad, all of these things that then will limit us and cause us to not be able to move around the country and have upward mobility within our careers. That is also stifling us. So it's not just the fear of going to school, right? Like that is a huge component, but it is beyond that, right? Like you can't even think about that when you haven't gone to the schools or had the resources or have all of the extracurriculars to get you into the schools that you want to go into, when your parents haven't had the generational wealth to provide those things to you.
That's awesome, Miriam. I like the way that you worded that. I'm just going to speak briefly on this one, and then I'm going to answer Peter's question. But I think that another thing that we have to think about in terms of policy is how we hold accountability in this nation. You know, not only am I talking about the fact that, you know, defunding the police. What does that mean? I think I did some research a couple days ago, and in Milwaukee alone, the police department has spent millions of dollars on just settlement cases that come from police brutality and police misconduct. And how could we be using that money, those millions of dollars, to then go to our educational system, to go to give resources for kids to have, you know, these things that, you know, to be a part of this institution that we're all at today, to even experience this conversation. I feel like, you know, we really do have the ability to. It's just about when are we going to start really saying that as a society, this is what we need to do. And in terms of accountability, I think that, you know, in police brutality, it's pretty transparent on how that kind of goes together, but also just on college campuses. You know, Brock Turner was a white male who had raped someone behind a dumpster, and he only got 6 months sentence, and he only served 3. Now, I know that there's so many other cases that we could bring up that compare to this unjustly, but so having that accountability, what does justice really mean? And in terms of sustainability, that's really why we truly shout no justice, no peace, because you know, you can't have this world where injustice is here and it's prevalent in all of our lives, and then, you know, just expect us to be okay with that. But to answer Peter's question real quick again, it says, I wonder if someone could speak to their perspective on what the most pressing issues in their eyes of environmental sustainability that disproportionately affects by BIPOC communities. And my number one answer immediately is the media. Not just talking about Facebook and Twitter and all of the false information from that, but going back to 1915, The Birth of a Nation, how that literally, that movie alone, shown and endorsed by Woodrow Wilson in the White House, he called it history with lightning, but really what it did is it rebirthed the Ku Klux Klan, and, you know, it demonized, criminalized the Black man and who African Americans are. And I think that that mindset was still prevalent during the super predator case and all of that media hype in the 80s and the 90s, and still today. With Trayvon Martin being assumed guilty and, you know, murdered, lynched in the streets, this really does go all the way back to why do we want African Americans and other marginalized groups to be seen as criminals? Well, again, bringing you back to that 13th Amendment, if you're a criminal, you can have your rights taken away. So I believe that the media is one huge role that really causes us to not be able to reach the sustainability, because it points the finger at the other person and it actually like represents a group of people without them representing themselves. So I think that that's just a little bit tricky there, but that would be my answer for sure.
Lovely, Hannah, as always. And I feel the same sentiments. I quickly wanted to answer, along Krista also would like to answer Steve Hurrell's question that asks to the students from Racine and Milwaukee, can you comment on what the greater Green Bay community can do to make people of color more welcome? This region is not as diverse as you were raised, and I'm wondering what we might learn from more diverse communities in Wisconsin. And me coming from Milwaukee, Milwaukee is, I believe, top 5 now. At one point, we're #1 most segregated city in America, but also being seen as currently the harshest and most difficult place for people of color, specifically Black people, to live in. So although we have that diversity, we are not amazing at providing equal opportunity and safety towards the ethnic minorities within the city. So as far as changing, Green Bay can definitely, you know, like there is a lot of diversity that I noticed that's being increased within the city, but I would look at Milwaukee and cities like Racine or just cities southeast Wisconsin as guides on what not to do as far as further pressing those minoritized ethnicities, but also being aware of the politics and the harshness as far as racism within housing. And Milwaukee didn't just become a segregated city because of, you know, individuals deciding like, oh, we're going to create our own Latinx neighborhood, we're going to create our own Black neighborhood, we're going to create our own Hmong neighborhood. Minorities were able to buy housing or weren't able to afford housing, as well as they were blocked out of moving into these neighborhoods that had white people, or being able to diversify those neighborhoods. Or once they did, those who were white left those areas, and then as well as the resources to making those roads and just the environment safe and convenient as far as I go back to safety, sustainable living within those areas. When you drive around Milwaukee, you see where all the money goes towards the roads in certain areas. You see what money goes towards policing and continuing to control the people in those areas. It's definitely some improvements that I see Green Bay does as far as providing different resources a little bit, but I'm not too immersed within the community because I do live on campus. But I do notice that there is a lot of financial discrepancies between the east side and the west side of town as far as roads, the types of stores. You can easily see the effects of gentrification, but also see the effects of racial environment, racism within the environments as far as going into more suburban areas and being able to see Targets, Walmarts, grocery stores, businesses that are needed and beneficial towards the community and aren't putting toxic influences. Whereas you go to more poor environments, you'll see liquor stores on the corner, you'll see easy accessible places that can cause drug addictions or alcohol addictions or just lack of resources that are available to those who live within that area. Those are just things that are kind of adding to the environmental racism, but also you get to see how people's response to that is gentrification of like, we'll clean it up. And, the idea of cleaning up an environment that is run down sounds amazing, but we're not going to create a sustainable environment for those who live there already. We're going to clean it up so that we can whitewash this area and make it as, wholesome and sustainable as our other areas. So just being able to acknowledge and vote and being able to realize who's in control of these areas and what are they doing to create equal opportunity for all people within the city and how we can learn and grow. If anything, I would hope that Green Bay isn't aspiring to be like cities like Milwaukee or Racine, but aspiring to be better and to be more inclusive and to improve within their housing, improve within the disparities between the Packer side of town and the non-Packer side of town. Because I can easily, whenever I drive to the mall, it's like I'm in two different areas. It's like I'm not even in the same city anymore. So just being aware of those things, educating yourself on those things, and being aware of those who are in policy places who can change those environments. Sorry for talking a minute. I'll let you go, Krista.
It's okay. I just started to type my response, but basically I was just saying, like agreeing with Nettie, it's important to acknowledge like the extreme gentrification that you see within neighborhoods, and that's in Racine especially. I'm from the north side of Racine, and if you've ever been there, people would call it the ghetto, they would call it the hood. We have one grocery store on the north side of Racine. It's a pick and save, and even then it's on past 4 miles, so it's known as like a nicer white, not predominantly white neighborhood. And like we're surrounded by liquor stores and unkept gas stations and a Family Dollar. Like we don't really have the same resources that predominantly white neighborhoods would have, and in terms of the quality and the quantity. So I just feel like in terms of like the Green Bay community, this is just coming from a personal standpoint. I feel like whenever, for instance, I'm on the east side, I have to tiptoe. I have to put on my customer service voice. I just feel like things like that, ridding Blacks and whites and any other minority or racial or ethnic group, the same of the stigmas that we're so inherently different that we shouldn't intermingle. I just feel like realizing we're all people and we all affect each other and we can all help each other and learn things from each other is essential in just creating a welcoming and inviting space. Exactly like Nettie said, I would never encourage GB to want to be anything or aspire to be anything like we're seeing in Milwaukee, because like she said, Milwaukee's the second worst and Racine is the third worst place in the country for African Americans to live. So yeah, just in conclusion, literally ridding each other of the stigmas that we're attached to, and they're so stupid and pointless, and like disregarding stereotypes, honestly, and just taking the time and the effort to learn who someone is because you just want to be a good person and not judging them by their peers or what other people who are the same race as them have done.
Wow. Thank you so much, everyone. I am inspired and humbled and really grateful to each of you for showing up and standing up and speaking tonight, and for everybody who attended. You know, Krista, I wrote down something you said, which was, we're not going to stop until we get what we want. And what that demand was, what you talked about was equality, you know, to be seen and treated as an equal human being. And then you said, and that's just how it's going to be. And you invoked history there too. And I think all of that was very powerful, along with so much of what was said this evening. So it's pretty amazing what you all were able to share here through Zoom, and we've recorded this, and I hope we can share it more broadly. Thanks again, everybody, for coming. We do have another event coming up. It's going to be on March 8th, and it's called Sustainable Voices. It's part of our sixth. Let's see. Make sure I have this right. Yeah, our 6:30 concert series, again on March 8th. And I believe there's going to be some music played as part of that by an African-American composer. So it does connect with some of what we talked about here tonight. Thanks again, everybody. And I think we will call it a night here. Take care.